Hello and welcome to Recyclist. I'm your host, Eric Provost. I'm very excited for this week's episode. I have an incredibly special guest. Please help me welcome to the show right now, Mr. K. Scott Griffith, the president of SG Collaborative Solutions. Thank you so much for joining me today, sir.
It's a pleasure, Eric. Thank you.
Absolutely. And for those who might not know, this is a waste and energy podcast. So there's probably a lot of people within the industry who aren't quite familiar with you yet. I'm sure they will be very familiar with you in the coming year. But for those who might not know, what is SG Collaborative Solutions, sir?
Yeah, great question, Eric. SG Collaborative Solutions is a consulting company that works and specializes in what we call high consequence industries. That is, those industries where mistakes, errors, and adverse events can result in sometimes catastrophic results, plane crashes, hospitals, law enforcement. Certainly, when you look across the energy, gas, and recycling sectors, dealing with hazardous materials, the work that your industry sectors do would fit under the term high consequence.
Yeah, and you mentioned aviation there, kind of in passing, but I'm really fascinated. You actually have a very deep connection to the aviation industry. Former pilot with American Airlines, I believe, correct?
That's correct. I was an international airline captain for American Airlines, and I became the chief safety officer.
And in addition to all of that stuff, you have just recently announced, I believe at the end of January 2026, you and SWANA officially announced a brand new collaboration. I'm excited to get into that, but I think to really appreciate this new collaboration, this new program, I think it'd be really prudent to kind of get into your background and find out how that came about. I can already see it behind you. You are also the author of a book. I have a copy right here. Thank you very much for that, by the way. The Leader's Guide to Managing Risk. And that's what this entire conversation kind of is going to be about, because that has kind of become your big area of focus when it comes to industrial concerns. And you did some work. I did some work. You did quite a bit of work with the aviation industry in terms of helping that along. But just to kind of start at the ground level, um, I believe it all kind of starts with what you call your reliability model, correct?
Correct.
And in your book, it's really interesting because the way you break it down, I think is it seems very obvious when you look at it, but you essentially break it down based on what is the percentage chance of this level of something screwing up. Okay, now we've got to the next level. What is the percentage chance of something at this level happening? What is the percentage chance of the next level happening? You break it down based on, I believe, systems, individuals, and organizations. I don't think it's exactly that wording, but I'm that's about right, isn't it?
Yeah, you got three out of the four elements correct. So good job, Eric. So it's something we call the sequence of reliability. And by the way, you said it appears somewhat obvious. I had a professor in college. He was a math teacher, and he asked us a question, and I raised my hand. And I'm really kind of an introvert, but I raised my hand, answered the question, and he looked at me and he said, "Young man, you seem to have an intuitive grasp of the obvious." And I thought that was a compliment until I went home and thought about it. And so what appears obvious is not necessarily the way most organizations see, understand, and manage risk. Oftentimes, businesses and government agencies wait for bad things to happen and then they investigate. And although that's a necessary component of any high consequence organization, the real opportunity lies in looking below the surface. So, if you look at adverse events, including injuries, fatalities, industrial accidents, it's the tip of the iceberg. And Friedrich Heinrich was a sociologist in the 1940s who came up with Heinrich's pyramid. Most occupational safety and health professionals are familiar with that. That for every top level catastrophe, there's an order of magnitude, maybe 10 times as many other accidents involving harm, and you keep going down. So it expands out in the form of a pyramid. But what we see it as an iceberg is that most organizations don't see the hidden risk inside their everyday successful outcomes until things go wrong. And then the tendency is to blame and shame or punish. And this is true in most every industry across the globe. The challenge is that we have to pull back the blinders, if you will, and look below the surface. And to see below the surface, we need frontline employees to come forward and be willing to admit not only the hazards in the workplace, but the hazards in their own behaviors and choices. And that's the paradigm shift. The science is clear. The more risks that are seen, understood, and managed, the greater the likelihood of prevention.
And the book gets into a myriad of different topics. It's not just solely about your reliability. Like you talk about Steve Irwin, you talk about COVID. As a matter of fact, there's a chapter specifically about major world challenges, which I find amazing, specifically because in terms of major world challenges, you have war and peace, which are undeniably major challenges. But on that same level, you put parenting, which I think is amazingly hilarious. I don't have any experience in that, but I would imagine there are a lot of parents out there that says, "Yeah, that sounds about right. Parenting's probably on the same level as war and peace." But there's another thing toward the beginning of your book that I also found very interesting. You directly address Murphy's Law, or you actually give it a different name, I believe.
Yeah, so let's go back to your parenting comment. So you may not be a parent, but you used to be a child at some point in your life earlier. That's something that we all share in common. We grow up as children into adulthood, and we see and understand risk through the lens of our experiences. Think about what that means. We do something and it's a little bit risky. We get away with it, and the human brain says, "Oh, I can do this because I've done it before." So that pattern recognition leads us into what the sociologists and psychologists call at-risk behaviors. And we think we're okay until things go wrong. And then our bosses or the regulator comes in and says, you shouldn't have done that. Well, did you know that statistically in the United States, at any given time, 81% of us are driving over the speed limit at any given time? So, if you will, our national culture is not one of compliance, it's one of, oh, it's okay as long as I don't crash the car. That mentality that we see in our society also comes into the workplace, where good people, good at doing their jobs, and sometimes, like Steve Irwin, the better we are at what we do, a la Steve Irwin, the
Hmm.
famous crocodile hunter,
Of
the
course.
less likely we may be to recognize that we have drifted into what many might call an unsafe space. We see this in all industries. We see people that are highly trained and good in their jobs, but their behaviors have drifted into a place where the risk may be unacceptable to the organization. So it's a geeky term, but we call it socio-technical science. That is, socio meaning the people side, and then technical being the systems and the environment that we put around the human being.
Yeah. And I know you really started to kind of really dive into this world while you were working as a pilot. One of the first things in the book, you talk about what was supposed to be a routine inspection of an airplane that's kind of spiraled now into this multi-decade odyssey to help, save lives across a myriad of different industries. Um, how did I know you talk about you became a safety officer with American Airlines? How did this wind up turning into what you eventually created as ASAP, the Aviation Safety Action Program?
Yeah, boy, great question, Eric, and thank you for diving deep into the book like that. So the book starts out with a description of a plane crash that I witnessed. I was doing a walk around inspection on a Boeing 727 at Dallas Fort Worth International Airport. This was in August 2nd, 1985. And every pilot is required to do an inspection of the exterior aircraft. And I looked up in the sky and I saw a Lockheed L-1011 coming into land, and it was in distress. It had just come out of a cloud formation and was so low on the approach that it struck a car on Highway 114, bounced up, and I'm watching this plane attempting to make the runway. And unfortunately, the left wing struck an above ground water tower, and the plane cartwheeled and burst into flames. And so, as I was watching this, it was almost like, a slow motion movie. You could see it happening in real time. And then a few seconds later, I was knocked to the ground by a wind gust. And then a few moments after that, it was a torrent of rain. And so I ran up into up the jet bridge, fumbled with my keys, unlocked the door, got on the airplane. The plane was rocking back and forth violently, and the plane was about half full of people. And somebody looked out the window and said, "There's been a plane crash." And there became a viral panic on the aircraft. People wanted to just get away, get off, and some of them were trying to go out over the emergency exits. And so I picked up the passenger address system and said, "Everybody, stay where you are. Don't go outside. The safest place to be right now is on this airplane." And so prevented people from going out over the emergency exits. And then the agent came down and we escorted all the people off via the jet bridge. So subsequent to that, what the investigation revealed was that it was a wind shear microburst. And a microburst is an intense downdraft of wind that exits out from a meteorological formation. And the interesting thing about a microburst is that in some cases, it's not visible to the human eye. It's just wind. It's not rain. It's not any sort of precipitation that the pilots could see on their radar. And so when it hits the ground, that column of air twirls out in what they call vortices, in a vortex, a circular vortex. And that vortice then, when you're close to the ground, is violent enough that if not prepared for it, it can overcome the thrust ratio of the aircraft. So the metaphor was the pilots literally could not see or understand the risk ahead of the aircraft. And
Mm.
so that started to sink into me when, after the plane crash, I took a leave from the airline and went to work for NASA as a physicist under subcontract with NASA and the FAA, became a test pilot, and developed a laser system to scan ahead in clear air and detect the invisible wind. Well, today, every major airport in the world has some type of wind shear detection system, many of it like the system that I helped develop, laser based LIDAR. But the metaphor was, whether you're an individual or a team or an organization, you can only manage the risk you see and the risk you understand. Otherwise, you're just waiting for bad things to happen and investigating it. So I could go on for hours talking about the risk we encounter in our daily lives that we don't necessarily see. So we understand the risk of catching flu or COVID or some other type of respiratory virus, but we don't see it suspended in air. We don't see it on the doorknob. If we did, we would avoid it if we could. So that's an example of a risk that we might understand, but not necessarily see. Sometimes we understand a risk and we don't see it in society, like the risk of drunk driving. We all understand that there's a risk of drunk driving on our roadways. And by the way, we lose about 12,000 loved ones each year to drunk drivers. It's well understood. We know it's a challenge. We know people do it. But did you know that for every drunk driver arrested, on average, they've driven drunk 88 times without having been caught? So even though we understand that that's a risk, as we're out driving around in society, we don't necessarily see it when it's present. And and the laws that we have to manage it are outcome biased, retroactive. We wait for someone to get pulled over by the police officer or for a crash, and it's too late at that point. So we're not proactive in most instances, we are reactive. And this approach, this what we call collaborative high reliability and collaborative just culture, is designed to help organizations and individuals see and understand risk and then build systems and manage people long before the plane crashes or the patient dies.
Obviously, the ASAP program that you helped pioneer with the FAA was incredibly successful. The FAA said that it was a major contributing factor to what was it, reducing fatalities or injuries by 95% across the industry.
yeah, fatal plane crashes, which are obviously fatalities and injuries. But yeah, the fatal plane crashes is the dominant metric for the airline industry. So yes, the ASAP program was a large, maybe one of the primary contributors to that 95% reduction. But in general, what I would say, it's a metaphor again, that iceberg that we talked about earlier. The industry, in which I include the airlines, the regulator, and the labor associations, which represented the workforce, we came together to collaborate, and together we flipped the iceberg. We turned it upside down, saying plane crashes are not the main way we perform safety. We flipped the iceberg by looking below the surface and doing much more work proactively instead of waiting for the plane to crash and going back to investigate. So we moved from an outcome biased industry to a rule based compliance industry, where I perceive the solid waste industry to be today, to a more predictive risk based approach. And that included regulators, unions, and certainly the organizations.
And I certainly want to start talking about the new program that was just introduced with SWANA, because I imagine that a lot of those same principles that you kind of relied on with ASAP, you're essentially tailoring to the waste and energy industry. So, if you could, sir, start taking us through what exactly your plan is now, what exactly the idea is, this collaboration with SWANA, and how you plan to kind of start reforming the idea of safety around this industry the same way that you did with aviation.
So that's a great question, and I'll take a few minutes to sort of answer it. It's two parts. So
Of
uh,
course.
I'll describe I'll describe how we teamed up with SWANA. I was invited, I think, in October of 2024, to be a keynote speaker at their annual conference, and so I got to meet uh, Amy Burke and Elizabeth Rowe and the team at the leadership level, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. What I talked about was the need to move beyond compliance based programs, which are important. Certainly, you have regulators like the OSHA regulator, the EPA, Food and Drug Administration, others that are overseeing your industries, but that compliance alone was not going to get you to high reliability. So there was a need to move beyond just the traditional occupational and safety and health strategies. Not that they're not important, they are, but humans don't always perform the way we think they perform.
I was just going to say, do you think it's fair to say that with the compliance programs that were in place, that people just felt like they were checking a box?
I think that's definitely. I have to be careful how I say this, because as an
That's fair.
outsider looking in, uh, what I understand, and I've been told, and I've done some research, that the OSHA recordable injury rates in this industry have fallen to,
Hmm.
it appears to be about the fourth most dangerous industry in the U.S. And again, you're working in a very complex environment when you look at waste collection and disposal, recycling, resource and recovery, landfills, environmental operations, and the maintenance and repair that goes with it. You're dealing with equipment that's definitely hazardous. They're required to wear personal protective equipment. They're working with machinery, and there's a tendency in that environment to enforce the rules, which is wonderful. But what happens when no one's looking? What happens when no one is there? And I'll tell you a quick little story. And again, I'm an outsider, so but we're all, just like we were all children at one point in our lives. We're all residential customers of solid waste disposal. If you live in an area where you have trash pickup, you're a customer. So I had a love seat in my backyard that had been out in the elements for about 20 years, and it was a metal rocker. It was about 6 feet long and 3 feet deep, and it had rusted out, and I didn't have time to repair it or the ability. So I called my local collection company and said, "When's the large trash pickup day?" And they told me. So I put it on a dolly and I dragged it out to the curb, and it's sitting right next to the recycle and trash can. And I stood it up on its end vertically, And then the next morning at 7 a.m., I peeked out the window to watch how they were going to load it into the truck. Now, I said they, it was really a single person operator. So one person comes up and he presses the button, the pincher arms of the hydraulic lift come out of the truck, grab the can, raise it vertically, and fling the contents into the truck, just as it was designed. So I thought, well, how is a single man or woman going to get out of the truck and get that love seat into the vehicle? Well, he got out, went over to the love seat, hoisted it on top of the can, and went back to the pressed a button. Now the pincher arms come out and grab the can again and flung it like a catapult with the love seat on top, and it flew over the truck, crashed in the middle of the street. Now I don't I don't know if that was the procedure that was required, or if this individual was getting creative, or if this individual was time compressed. I can't imagine that was the procedure. If it was, then we have an issue with how we had designed that workplace for that individual. So he went over and dragged it back again. And on attempt number two, oh, by the way, when the left seat hit the concrete, a woman was walking her dog. The dog ran off. She screamed. Everybody was upset. He drags it back over and tries it for catapult attempt number two. And number two, it went straight in the back of the truck. He gets in, mission accomplished. Now, my question to all of the solid waste disposal professionals on the call, do you think that he went back and reported that? Do we think that he went back and reported that to his boss? No one got hurt. No one got injured. He did his job. Didn't follow procedure, I suspect, but would he report that? Now, the obvious answer is for me, I don't know. I suspect that he didn't. I suspect that that happens dozens of times every day in most companies in one form or another. Maybe someone's not wearing personal protective equipment. Maybe they're driving a little over the speed limit. We as humans will cut corners to get our jobs done. And most of the time, the environments and the organizations we work with are measuring us on our output, our productivity, on what we do in getting the job done. And if our boss isn't there to see it, or it's not recorded on video, we may cut corners for good reason to get the job done. But the risk that we may be taking may be looking a little bit like Steve Irwin, where we're pressing the limits because we're good at what we do.
I imagine when it comes to risk management and reducing risk as much as possible, new technologies that you talked about with, seeing that invisible wind and the laser guided the wind shear, new technologies are going to help. But I imagine that ultimately a lot of these programs are going to boil down to just trying to change behaviors. What percentage would you say of the program is essentially just trying to get people to act differently?
It's interesting. There are multiple consulting companies that teach what they call behavior-based training. And the interesting thing about that term is that it seems to put the responsibility onto the worker, to the employee. There's no doubt that our behaviors impact how we perform our jobs, whether it's safely or not. But it starts with the organization recognizing the risk, seeing and understanding the risk. Then it proceeds to, have we put them in a safe environment that's not only safe when things go right, but is it resilient? I talk about this in the book. Is the system resilient when things go wrong? So if my personal protective equipment, if the strap breaks on my N95 mask, will the mask still do the job? Because that's the real world that I live in. When I was a chief safety officer at American Airlines, we had to make a corporate decision on the de-icing fluid that we spray on airplanes. Now, the technical viscosities or the technical categories are, there's two big types of de-icing fluid. It's essentially antifreeze. So there's propylene glycol and ethylene glycol, one of which is more hazardous to humans than the other. Propylene glycol is in food additives. It's in food colorings, but it's more expensive because it takes a greater manufacturing process to manage it, to make it safe for humans. But ethylene glycol, like antifreeze, is pretty abundant and it's cheaper. So you can imagine the world's largest airline had to decide, when you buy bulk quantities, should we buy ethylene glycol or propylene glycol? Well, I had industrial hygienists who worked for me, and they went out and did inspections at different airports and said, well, we can buy either fluid as long as our employees wear PPE. And I said, well, do they? And they said, yes. And I said, how do you know? They said, well, every time we show up with a safety vest that says safety department on it, they're wearing the PPE. And I said, well, that's not good enough. Let's go out without wearing the safety identification. Let's look at them in the middle of the night from the inside of the airport terminal. So I went to Chicago O'Hare and got some binoculars, looked like a passenger, and I looked out at a fleet service clerk in a what we call a cherry picker, an elevated platform, and he was de-icing the back of a 767. And as soon as he started spraying the airplane, the splashback on his PPE covered his goggles, and he took them off. So the necessity of the job was the PPE only worked under ideal conditions, and people were cutting corners when it didn't help them get the job done. So those are the kinds of things that safety programs need to recognize, is that good people will cut corners when production competes with safety. We all do that. We all drive over the speed limit. Sometimes we talk on cell phones. We do things thinking we're in a safe place, all with good intentions. So the stronger the compliance program, the more we have to focus on the risk and the individual in the system that they're working in. And when we open the doors to not just behavior based, which we get to, but we let the employee know we're going to look at the risk and the system first every time. What situation did we put that worker in that was expected to load the glider, my love seat, and if he didn't have help, how did we expect him to get it in the truck? Did we expect him to call for a backup, somebody else to bring another truck? What would the consequences have been for that? What system did we set them up in? And then we do get to their behavior, but we'd rather them come forward and admit what they did than us not know about it. And we guarantee that we'll respond to them in a fair and consistent manner when they come forward.
And I imagine that when you're talking about, introducing a brand new safety program, just like you're working on with SWANA, I completely agree with you. People are going to cut corner. I do it fairly often in my personal life just to make things slightly easier on myself. And that's, the onus behind why many people do it, is just to make things slightly easier on themselves. So when it comes to implementing a big new plan, how do you get people and companies to actually buy in? How do you go from just telling people, hey, if we do X, then we can achieve, Y result? Beyond just saying that and showing people a few graphs and talking about a few numbers, how do you get people to actually buy in to this new program?
So the key to setting up the new program that we call collaborative just culture, it's what we call evidence producing. The technical term that we use in aviation is that it's an evidence-based program in aviation. We have over 800 of these programs that have been in operation since 1994, and they are audited to a standard every 2 years. So the Collaborative Just Culture program is a brand new approach for the solid waste and recycle industries to create a similar program that guarantees when employees report in and they come forward that no one's going to lose their job, no one's going to be disciplined, as long as they participate in the management of that risk. As long as if it requires retraining, we do that. If it requires more education, we do that. If it requires helping us to build better systems, they have to participate in the program, and no one gets disciplined or harmed by coming into the program. Easier said than done, Eric, because you can have a boss that says, come to me with your, it's like a parent telling their child, come to me with your, what teenager goes to their parents and says, hey, mom and dad, I know I'm not supposed to drink alcohol, but I went to this party and no one was there and one kid had this. In order to create that environment where employees are coming forward, you have to commit to this program in writing. You have to bring your HR department into it. You have to bring your safety officer into it and your operational leaders into it. And they form what we call a triad committee, triad meaning three, where we have HR, safety, and the operational division working together to manage the risk, not just the employee, it's the risk, the systems, the people, and the organization. So for that individual that catapulted the love seat over the truck, we don't start with his behavior, which is what most organizations would do. Hey, Joe, why didn't you follow procedure? Let's step back and say, well, Joe, what kind of risk were we managing here? Was it a bulky piece of equipment? Were you worried that there was something sharp on it? What was the risk of you doing what you did? Well, there was a safety risk to the people, nearby bystanders. There was a risk to him, the employee. Could have been risk to the equipment. What system did we put you in? So we break it down and look at, well, we gave you a system that was not perfect in the sense that we didn't have a device that could come out and pick up that love seat. Those pincher arms would not have picked up that love seat. And if we'd had two men or women on the truck, two people might have gotten it into the truck easier, but he only had one. So what options did he have? Call another truck. Well, that's going to take time. It's going to cost money. But this was, by the way, the designated large trash pickup day, by the way. So was he trying to save the company from having to bring another truck? Was he trying to save time? I don't know. But he would report what was going on in his mind when he made that behavioral choice. We approach that not from the standpoint of, hey, Joe, why did you do it? It's what was the risk? What was the system? Then we look at why did you choose that behavior and what factors may have contributed to it. So I know that that's one simple, maybe a silly example. There must be thousands or tens of thousands of other examples where good people are doing their jobs in hazardous environments, sometimes cutting corners to get the job done. And unless we know about it, we're not able to manage it. We can give them PPE, we can tell them to work safely, but if we don't see it and understand it, we're not going to manage it from the safety office. It has to be a team effort.
So it starts with the companies committing to a roundtable format.
It's a roundtable format. There within the program are two processes. One is what we call a collaborative risk review, which is literally a roundtable, as you described.
Mhm.
When we do think that there's some behavior that would potentially warrant retraining or discipline, it moves into the triad process with HR, safety, and risk. And the HR policies, by the way, have to be evolved or adapted to recognize this. Because most HR policies, in fact, virtually all HR policies, talk about compliance, not recognizing that every rule may have justifiable reasons to breach the rule. There may be places where we have to deviate from a rule or a policy or procedure to save a life or to avoid harm. There will be justifiable breaches, but most HR policies don't recognize that. We adapt the language in the policies and we create an environment where people know that when they come forward, they're going to be supported. They may be retrained, but they're always going to be supported. And in many cases, they'll be rewarded. And by rewarded, I mean they'll be given attaboys and attagirls and even promoted at times when they identify risks that help the organization move forward. So the program is the key to instilling confidence that people can come forward. And you do it in a documented way that gets independently audited. Most organizations that start out doing this have to adjust to the fact that they're going to be audited every 2 years if they want to keep the qualification that comes, the certification that comes with the program. But that's a very important part of this. As we adopt this across the industry, our plan with SWANA is to initiate training of individuals. We will certify individuals in our method. They will then go back to their organizations and develop interest in getting a program up and running and qualified. As we develop each program across North America, Each program will commit to 4 specific measurements, and then through the independent analytics of those measurements, we will turn it into an evidence-based endeavor. And over time, what we're going to show is that those programs that are operating successfully will start to lower their injury and accident rates. And from there, we think there will be a cascade of organizations across North America willing to achieve the same success we did in aviation.
And I know that you kind of touched on a little earlier, waste for the average people with the waste and energy industry is a much more complex beast than a lot of people realize. There's a lot of pieces that go into that. Is there any specific aspect of waste collection, landfills, the collection itself, transfer stations, that based on the numbers you guys are trying to focus on the offset of releasing this program is like, hey, we really need to hit the landfills hard, or we really need to hit the transfer stations hard on the offset because that's where we're seeing the most incidents? Or what is the thought process behind the rollout?
So, because it's such a diverse and a geographically large industry, you've got for-profit companies doing this work. You've got municipal and county governments doing this work. Um, our goal is to move after we get the collaborative disc culture programs out in the industry. Our goal is to move to the next step, the highest level of collaborative high reliability. That's where the risk assessments start to come in, Eric, because every industry will be different. In your space, between waste collection, recycling, landfills, and maintenance and repair, the industry leaders will have to come together and determine where they think the need is the greatest. Clearly, the occupational safety and health record spans across the industry, where you look at catastrophic outcomes. If you're storing nuclear waste, for example, or PFAS, as I've learned over the years, are starting to leach its way into wastewater and sewage systems.
Oh, yes. Very big issue. I was talking about that with someone just last week. PFAS is a huge talking point these days.
So that's a great example of that sequence of reliability. We've been encountering PFAS for decades and not knowing the harm that it could be causing in our bodies. And as they leach into our groundwater and wastewater and our water systems. By the way, we're starting to see we're the first place we're starting, because that's where the interest is in the solid waste services sector. But whereas we have municipal and county governments, they're looking at this, at piloting it in the solid waste sector and moving it into water and sewage, EMS, fire, and policing, because where you have government services, we're looking for consistency across each of those sectors. So I would love to come in and work with the think tanks, the academic centers, the research organizations, the scientific companies such as yours, to look at where we could target the risks applications for this. Because clearly, if you have limited resources, and we all have limited resources, we want those dollars to do the most good. So if we can target industry sectors where OSHA recordable rates are the highest, we should start there. If we look at catastrophic potential, landfills and nuclear waste, we should also start there. So I leave it to the industry leaders to come together in a roundtable. I'd be happy to contribute what we know about this to develop what's called a risk register. That's a registry of the risk, both to the public and to the employees that work for us. And when you start to see that risk register and you go after the biggest bang for the buck, you will see a cascade of organizations wanting to come on and apply it at different places along the register. So, because the industry appears motivated, because you've recently fallen in your injury rates and accidents, I think that there is a motivation to do more than just the traditional compliance programs. And by the way, this approach is pro regulator. We know that there are regulators that sometimes can be heavy handed. And I'll speak with my experience with OSHA. OSHA is a particular challenge because they regulate such a wide array of industries, from nursing homes to forestry to airlines to recycling. They're not experts in every industry. They can't be. So they look at outcomes and they sometimes come in and impose fines or sanctions. That's what most regulators do in the beginning until they gain the expertise within the industry to be more rule based. We're going to help them jump straight to risk based. So, under OSHA's voluntary protection program, we think that there's an opportunity for the industry to lead the regulator to a better place. Let's show the regulator that we can apply our resources to these risk based programs and show better results, better outcomes. Because the OSHA's not going to be experts in doing that today. But if they open their voluntary protection programs up to these programs as demonstration efforts, they'll see the advantages of endorsing or promoting this type of an approach. And again, for every safety professional out there that specializes in compliance, that doesn't go away. It enhances what the compliance professionals do by moving to the next level of risk-based safety, not just compliance-based. And the compliance base gets stronger. Interestingly enough, you know, the way to improve an individual's regulatory compliance is to show them how vulnerable they are doing what they do successfully. So it's not telling me more about the rule that I need to wear the safety vest. It's showing me in such a way that I can connect emotionally with what you're telling me is good for me. Because my brain doesn't believe I'm ever going to crash the plane. I never have. My brain doesn't believe I'm going to get injured.
I have a 100% success rate up till now.
When I'm 22 and bulletproof, there's probably nothing you can tell me that I don't already know, at least in my mind, right? Now, when I'm 40 or when I'm 60, that's an interesting little paradigm shift too, because sometimes when you're 40, your experience has taught you the wrong lesson because you've made it through successfully. We all are accidents waiting to happen when we cut corners. It's just we think some of us are better at it than others until we're not. That was Steve Irwin's dilemma. It wasn't the crocodile that killed him; it was the stingray, and he had done this thousands of times, you know, with risk greater than the stingray. But he lived on the edge because that's where he got his success. And I'm a big fan of his. He did a whole lot for conservation. And, you know, my kids used to walk around the house saying crikey this and crikey that. But from a risk-based perspective, we don't want our employees to be Steve Irwins. We don't want our employees. By the way, this is a funny little story. When I came to the SWANA conference, they knew I was a pilot, and I think Amy and Elizabeth asked if I would walk out on stage wearing aviator sunglasses, and I said, "Well, I will, if you'll let me speak directly to the audience." And that is, we don't want to be Top Gun pilots. We don't want to be mavericks flying on the edge. We want to be understanding the risk, and we want your airline pilot to be safe and reliable. We don't want them flying like Tom Cruise did in those movies. We want a more risk-based approach.
And in terms of the program and the training, the information, specifically, how is that going to begin rolling out? Are there plans to have training blocks at upcoming conferences? Are there plans to go out to meet individual landfills or individual stations to begin training? What is the idea there?
So our strategy is we have a three-step strategy. We're going to offer these individual qualifications with SWANA members receiving discounts. So any individual, we hope to get a broad array of safety, operational, and HR professionals in any of the industrial sectors that SWANA serves, and get them individual qualifications. So it's a 5-week course requiring 2 sessions a week. And from the end of that course, they get a certification that qualifies them as collaborative, high reliability champions. And we hope to spread that out broadly across the industry. We'll be doing this over the next couple of years. At the same time, we want to get individual organizations. We want to get landfill companies, recycle companies, the collection and disposal companies to achieve certification in the program. And that's going to take more than just one or two individuals. It's going to take a whole team effort. So HR policies have to be revised, training has to be done. You have to build the structure in place. We've been doing this with these virtual cohort sessions in about 5 weeks. We think any organization can get a program up and running and qualified in about 4 to 6 months. And from that, the auditor comes in and does what we call a structural audit, and they look at the policies, the training, the tools, and the processes that are set up. The auditor comes back 2 years later to look at the data that you've collected to see how you're analyzing risk, how you're managing people, what solutions have been put in place. There are 4 measurements that come with the program. So that's the second step. And the third step is to take advantage of research organizations. We expect that SWANA's Applied Research Foundation, ARF, will play a role in looking at these programs as they get qualified across the country, putting that information back out in your membership's hands so that every member gets aware of it, and that independently we take these programs to an evidence-based level like we did in aviation. From there, we think over the next 5 years, we will see a cascade of organizations adopting the program, getting qualified, and seeing accident and injury rates going down dramatically. That's the strategic plan.
And I believe we're going to be hearing the words collaborative just culture program quite a bit in the industry over the next couple years. Where can we point people toward in terms of some initial information so they can begin learning about this and maybe think about, before they even have the opportunity, think about adopting the program or, beginning to learn some of the principles?
So the first place you can go is the SWANA website. SWANA will have, as we build our collaboration, they will be promoting the program on the website. You can also go to our website. It's sgcpartners.com, Sierra Golf Charlie Partners.com. So that's our website. Any information we put out there, we do it in connection with SWANA. You can sign up for these virtual courses. You can email us and we'll get back to you if you want to have a conversation. As we go forward, we're going to be participating in safety training workshops. I think we have one that SWANA is sponsoring in Washington, D.C. coming up pretty soon. So SWANA is going to be marketing and promoting this. We're going to be marketing and promoting this. Those podcast listeners, if you want to contact me, Eric will put up those links on the podcast. You should be able to reach us that way, either through SWANA or contact us directly. And we invite your participation. We know that this industry is important to the public. I'm a customer. I'm a strong proponent of government and private industry working together. We know that what you do is vital to our health and safety. We want to help you achieve the same success that we did in aviation and these other industries. And I'd like to see this industry lead the way for others like fire and police and other city services, because all of this is important work.
Yeah. And lastly, sir, let's talk about your book one last time. Where can people look that up? Once again, The Leader's Guide to Managing Risk.
Thank you, Eric. You can get it on Amazon or you can go to our website and we can direct you to the platforms. If you want to reach out to me directly, we'll have conversations. If your organization is considering doing this, I can send you a complimentary book like I did to Eric, because we want to promote this. Our goal is for the book to pull people into the programs to help them succeed. We're not doing it to make money on the book. We're doing this to help you build reliability into your organization. So if you want a book quickly, get it on Amazon. If you want to reach out to us, we'll find a way to get it to you some other way.
And once again, Mr. K. Scott Griffith, thank you so much for joining me today. Again, I know we're going to be hearing a lot about this in the coming years. That that figure, a 95% reduction in uh, fatal crashes in the FAA. That's such a stark, striking figure. It'd be wonderful if we could have that same kind of reduction across the waste and energy industries. And I appreciate you coming in and helping us trying to achieve that, sir.
Well, thank you, Eric, and kudos to you and Diamond Scientific for the work you're doing and the podcast. I'm a big fan of what you're doing. You're providing a very valuable service. Thank you for having me today.
Well, thank you, sir. Once again, make sure to check him out. Again, my guest, Mr. K. Scott Griffith. One last time, go ahead and check out his book, The Leader's Guide to Managing Risk. But once you check out everything that SG Collaborative Solutions is doing, do make sure to give a shout out to Diamond Scientific. You can check them out online at diamondsci.com. That's diamondsci.com. You can even set up a personalized presentation just by calling 321 223 7500. My name is Eric Provost. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Recyclist. And ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next time. Thank you.